Welcome back to Spider Red. I'm going to discuss the college football playoff. I'll talk about each team for the Rose Bowl, and then we'll move on to the two teams for the Sugar Bowl. I will pick winners of both, and then I'll talk about the championship game. If you watched my video before of my last top 25, I gave a quick prediction of who I thought was going to go in the playoff. I got all four of them right. Now, I did have Michigan and Washington swapped. I had Washington at number 1, and I had Michigan at number 2. But the college football playoff came in and gave Michigan number 1 and Washington number 2. So if we look at the bracket one more time, you have Michigan at number 1. They'll play Alabama, the 4th seed, at 5 o'clock. That's a Rose Bowl. And then the next game will be number 2 Washington against number 3 Texas in the Sugar Bowl, and that should be at 8:45. So let's start talking about the Rose Bowl first. We'll talk about the two teams for the Rose Bowl first. So let's go ahead and start with the 4th seed, Alabama Crimson Tide. This is their 8th college football playoff. They are 6-1 in the semifinals. In each game, they've beat a different team. You can look at this at Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Clemson, Washington, and Michigan State. Their only semifinal loss was actually their first appearance, and that's when Cardale Jones and Ohio State beat them in the semis. That's their only loss. They've went, of course, 6 times to the championship game. They're 3-3. They beat Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. And then their 3 losses, Clemson beat them twice, and then Georgia got them a few years back. Saban is looking at his 8th championship and extending that legacy. He has 1 with LSU. He has 6 with Alabama. And if you watch Pat McAfee's show, I've actually become pretty fond of Saban. I've always had a ton of respect for him, but listening to how he talks about football, his love for football, how much discipline he gives all these kids, how well he runs his program, Alabama's top notch. And I'm a huge Georgia fan. I hate Alabama, but I respect and I'm very fond of Saban. We'll take a brief look at their stats real quick. They were the SEC champions. They were 12-1. That only loss came very early with Texas beating them 24-34. They have the 18th ranked defense. They only give up 188 yards passing per game and then 124 yards rushing per game. And they're only allowing 18.4 points per game. And then they have the 54th ranked defense, which they average 228.5 yards passing with 172.7 yards rushing, which is pretty impressive, and they score 35 points per game. We'll talk through this a little bit. They rely heavily on Milroe, which they should. He is the quarterback, and he uses his feet really well. He moves in the pocket well. If he doesn't find anything, he knows to run, and he runs quite a bit. Georgia was trying to contain him. They did contain him, but they didn't get pressure on him, which still gave him time to find open receivers. You only can guard those wide receivers for so long. So he did really well. He stayed back. He found open receivers. They did just enough to beat Georgia. They had to play the perfect game, and they did. And you have to give them props for that. Their keys to beating Michigan is they've got to keep Milroe upright and moving around, similar to what they did with Georgia. They have to contain Michigan's running game. Michigan recently has been running the ball 40-plus times a game. And like I said a while ago, they have to stay mistake-free. They didn't have any turnovers against Georgia in the SEC championship. They will have to continue to do that. They didn't have a lot of penalties either. They will have to play a good, perfect game against Michigan because Michigan is a very good, loaded team. So that's the breakdown on Alabama. Let's move on to Michigan. So they are the 1 seed. This is their 3rd straight college football appearance. They're 0-2 in the semis. They lost to Georgia, and then they lost to TCU last year. They had a lot of turnovers, a lot of mistakes last year. So, like I said here, they're hoping to change their luck and win a semi. Their last championship was 1997. This year, they were the first team in college football to reach 1,000 wins, which is crazy. And then we know the Harbaugh stuff has been taught to death. He was suspended early. He was suspended late. I'm not getting into that. Harbaugh is looking to get his first national title. Going on, they were the Big Ten champions. They were 13-0. They have the second-ranked defense. They only allow 152 yards passing, roughly 87.1 yards rushing. That could be huge for against Alabama, who loves to run the ball. And they've only allowed 9.5 points per game, which is crazy. They have the 68th ranked offense, allowing or providing 218 yards worth of passing and 161.8 yards of rushing, and they average 36.7 points a game. In both of their top 10 matchups, which was Penn State and Ohio State, they ran the ball 40-plus times. And in the first game against Penn State, that first matchup, I think McCarthy only had like 9 passes because, in the second half, they ran the ball 32 straight times. And then against Ohio State, he had 20. So he had 20 in both big matchups for them, or less than 20, I should say. Their keys, to me, it's not about running the ball. Of course, they're going to have to run the ball, but they're going to have to let JJ pass, open him up, move him out of the pocket if they have to, let him roll out and make some throws. But I think they're going to have to throw the ball to have a chance to beat Alabama. They're not going to be able to line up and just pound that ball down Alabama's throat. I just think that Alabama's defense is too good for them to do that. So that's two of my keys. The other one is to keep Milroe from scrambling. They're going to have to limit how much he uses his legs like Georgia did. But not only do you got to contain Milroe, you've got to get pressure on him. That's what Texas did. Texas got to him early. Now, that was his first game, and he's grown a lot since. But if you look at Auburn did the same thing. You got to get up into his face, get pressure on him. If they get pressure on him, I think they'll have a shot. So let's move to my prediction. So this is a tough prediction because you give Saban this much time. Look at what his record is. He's 6-1. So when you give him this much time, he gets this team so prepared to win. They're very hard to beat. But I think Harbaugh's going to do it. I think they're going to beat Alabama. I have them winning 31-27. But I just think Michigan has that team. With everything that's happened this year, they're going to find a way to win, and they're going to beat Alabama to move on. Okay, for the last game, the Sugar Bowl, we have Texas and Washington. So I'm going to talk about the lower seed first. So we'll talk about the Texas Longhorns. They are the 3 seed. This is their first college football playoff, which is kind of crazy to think about. But their last championship was 2005. That was that thrilling win with Vince Young. That was such a great game against USC. They are in the top 4 of winning the most games in all of college football, which is impressive. And if you read there, I have three of the 4 teams in the college football playoffs this year have the most wins of all time. It's pretty impressive. So Steve Sarkisian was the 2020 Alabama OC that won a championship, and it was one of the best offenses that we've seen in a while. That was with Mac Jones and Devontae Smith. But this would be his first chance to win a national championship as a head coach. And of course, we all know that he coached back at Washington from 2009 through 2013. He's changed a lot with all the stuff that he's been through. So Sark has really came in and turned Texas around to get them back in the college football playoff. So let's take a look at their stats. They are the Big 12 champions. They were 12-1. That only loss was to Dylan Gabriel and the Oklahoma Sooners, that 30-34 loss. They are the 9th-ranked offense. They averaged 286 yards passing with 189 yards rushing, and they scored 36.2 points per game. If you see a trend here, the other 2 teams that we just talked about are very similar on the offensive side. Their defense is 23rd. They only allow 240.8 yards passing and 80.8 yards rushing, which is crazy. And then they've only allowed 17.5 points per game. They lost Brooks, their top running back, but they've had several guys step into the role and do very, very well. My keys for them is they must have consistent pressure on Penix. If not, he will eat all day long, especially with those 2 wide receivers he's got and a good running back coming out of the backfield. So they have to keep pressure on him, similar to what Michigan's got to do with Milroe. I mean, on that as well, that front 7 on the D is pretty impressive. But the secondary, they can be thrown on. If Washington can keep them contained and keep that front 7 from getting to Penix, that secondary is not as good. They really rely heavily on that front 7. Their other key is they're known not to finish their drives. Against Washington, as high-powered as their offense is as well, you can't be kicking field goals. You're going to have to score touchdowns to have a shot at this. But those are my keys for Texas. Let's move over to the Washington Huskies. They are the 2 seed. This is their second college football playoff appearance. They're 0-1. They lost to Alabama in 2017. They got beat 7-24. Their last championship, it was a shared championship in 1991. And this is only their second undefeated season before a bowl game. So this is pretty big for their program, even though we know Washington's always had a good football program. But Kalen DeBoer has turned this program around pretty quickly. He's already 24-2 in his first 2 seasons with Washington, which is impressive, very impressive. And they're actually going in as underdogs in the Sugar Bowl to the 3rd seed Texas that has lost a game. You don't see too many undefeated teams going into a playoff game as an underdog to a 1-loss team, but that's what Washington's going in as, and it should be a huge motivator for them. We'll take a look at the Huskies' stats. They are the Pac-12 champions, really the last true Pac-12 champion, as we would know the Pac-12. They are 13-0. They have the 11th ranked offense. They average 343 yards passing and 125 yards rushing. They average 37.7 points a game, which is, I keep saying this, it's crazy how good all these teams are this year. It's been so much fun. Now, they have the lowest ranked defense, and we all know defense wins championships. They do allow 263 yards passing and 133 yards of rushing, and they allow 23.6 points per game. But don't let that defense fool you to a certain degree, because I thought Oregon was a better football team. I thought that in that first game with Oregon and Washington, that Dan Lanning went for it a few too many times on 4th down trying to score, and they made a lot of mistakes. And I'm like, well, Oregon's going to come back and beat them for sure. And that wasn't the case. Washington came back and proved that they were the best team in the Pac-12, and they are a good football team. And that offense is loaded. Penix was the runner-up to the Heisman. They have 2 great wide receivers, especially in Roma Dunze. He is really good. Their running back is a top 30 running back. Don't let him fool you. I mean, he's a really good running back. They can run the ball really well, and that's going to be one of my keys. They've got to run it efficiently. I think helping keep a little pressure off of Penix and making smaller 3rd downs so that they're not in those long 3rd downs like 3 and 8 plus, I think will really help them. I think they need to go in there and play with tempo to keep that front 7 where they can't change them out, to not allow Texas to change that front 7 out, to stop Texas from getting fresh legs in. Very similar. I was lucky to go to the Peach Bowl this weekend, and Ole Miss ran an up-tempo to keep that top-ranked Penn State defense on the field and to kind of wear them out, and it worked. So I think Washington's going to have to do the same thing. They're going to have to keep an up-tempo on their offense. And like every team in the playoff, all 4 of them, they're going to have to limit their turnovers. But to me, it's going to be more important for Alabama and Washington to keep their turnovers down, especially Washington in this game. So if they can do that, they will have a shot at winning this semi. So let's take a look at this Sugar Bowl for my prediction. I'm going to use a comparison here. Texas has that 9th offense, 23rd defense. Well, Oregon had the 2nd offense and 22nd best defense. And Washington beat them both times. So I'm going to use that. And I just think that they're not going to be able to slow down Penix in that offense. And I'm going to actually have Washington as an undefeated underdog, upsetting Texas 37-31 to move on into the championship game. Now to the championship game with the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies. I kind of wanted it to be the Rose Bowl so I could say the granddaddy of them all. I know I talked about it earlier, but I miss having Keith Jackson's voice always saying that. But I still like Kurt Herbstreit. He's come around with me as well. Anyway, let's get to this championship game. These are two teams that, I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of picked more on my heart than smart. But I really want Michigan to win this game, and I want it to be a good game. The Georgia Bulldogs, that's my team. That's my home team. That championship game last year, it was great for us, but it was a horrible championship game. When you score 50-something points more than the other team, it just wasn't fun. I really want a fun championship game. And usually the college football playoff, usually the semis have been boring, and the championship game's been kind of decent. Well, last year the semis were awesome, incredible, with Georgia barely beating Ohio State. TCU kept finding a way to beat Michigan, and then the championship game was pretty bad. But this year I'm hoping, and this is what I'm going to pick, I'm going to have Michigan winning 45-42 in a shootout. So Harbaugh would get that national championship, add to his resume probably before he goes out to the NFL. Again, thank you for listening to Spider Red. You're actually hearing my music in the background finally. That came in. I absolutely love doing this. I can't wait until college football season next year. Continue to listen. I'll have more videos coming out soon. Tell somebody you love them. Later.